So the next one we're going to work on is identifying outcomes in our plans and that kind of stuff. So.
All right, so we are going to start Module 3, and just like Module 2, this module is split into 2 parts, so I'll be completing the first part, and Shauna will take over the second part. So for Part 1, we will be looking at the first learning objective on page 31, and that's participants understand that a community action agency plans for outcomes. I'm actually going to add one more learning objective that isn't on your book, and that's that participants recognize the relationship between agency outcomes and national goals. So in this segment, we will talk about the historic significance of the original 6 national goals, which are posted over there, and connect them with the 3 national goals in the National Theory of Change, which is over here, and then you all have a copy of the Theory of Change with your handouts. And Scribe, may I utilize your services, please? All right, so if you'll jump with me to page 32, we're going to talk about planning. So, why do we plan?
So hopefully make the best of our money and our resources.
Okay, absolutely. So, hopefully, all of you plan in your agency, and if so, why? You know, feel free to raise your hand or shout out some answers, and Shauna's going to write them down.
So we can respond and not react. Okay.
Respond and not react. That's a good one.
And prioritize too, especially with planning.
Prioritize, right? Yeah, that's really important. Right, that money is not endless.
To collaborate with others, we use kind of plan and know.
Okay. Anything else that we don't have on our flip chart already? All right, great ideas. Thank you, Shauna. Absolutely. We should be planning for all of these reasons. So while creating a strategic plan is technically the right way for an organization to manage effectively and efficiently, it is also a legislative mandate that all agencies produce a community action plan. I think Shauna introduced this concept earlier, and some of you might know what that is, and some of you might still be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what that is. I don't know that I should know what that is. It is a legislative mandate. And this includes needs assessments and also an assessment of agency resources, right? It's also a requirement, I think, still to do a risk assessment for your agency and your board. So the purpose of these assessments and the plan is to identify the improvements or the results that it will achieve. All right, so we are now on page 33 with the cartoon there. And what that's showing is a group of people, maybe it's agency staff, maybe it's a board. One of them says, we got the grant. Now we need to figure out what to do with it. So it's supposed to be a comical way of showing what not to do with your grant funds and how to plan, right? So it's not unusual for nonprofit agencies or community-based organizations to first go after funds, such as grants, and then only figure out what the program's about afterwards and what they need to do to accomplish to keep the money. So I propose, as well as, I'm sure Aaron and Shauna and the creators of ROMA, that this is not the way to seek out funding, support, or to allocate resources in your agency. Rather, you should decide how each funding source and what other resources you have can support your mission to meet an identified need. You also need to consider how all the agency resources support the outcomes you wish to achieve. All right, we are now on page 34. What are our results? So we're going to revisit Peter Drucker's question number 4. So Drucker advises us that the results of the social sector organizations are measured outside of the organization through changed lives and changed conditions. He says that we should look at both the short-term accomplishments and the long-term change. So for-profit organizations have a really easy way to determine the success. That's, did they make a profit? All of us in the nonprofit sector don't necessarily have that advantage there because we don't have those standards, right? We have to look at, were we successful by eradicating poverty, changing lives, bringing people to self-sufficiency? Do I have a volunteer to read the paragraph starting with, it is up to each agency?
I can read it.
Okay, thank you.
It is up to each agency to identify their successes and assure that they have clear documentation or evidence of the success. When these successes are reported to the state CSBG office and to the NASCSP, we can begin to understand the common results being achieved across the country.
Thank you. Yeah, so data must be considered during the planning phase of the ROMA cycle and include agency service data. We must consider the results or potentially a lack of results that we've achieved in the previous years. All right, so the final concept in this question is that of concentrating resources for success. So to reinforce the concept of using our mission as our guiding force, we need to refer to the idea of strengthening or abandoning services based on the quality of the results being produced. So starting with me on page 35, need alone does not justify continuing, nor does tradition. People in any organization are attached to the obsolete. The things that should have worked but did not. The things that once were productive and no longer are. So we need to consider, are we producing results that are sufficiently outstanding for us to justify putting our resources in this area? So in the latter case, more resources should be committed to strengthen the results. If essential performance areas are weak, they must be strengthened. What results does the agency want to achieve? So if your services aren't producing results, should you abandon them or strengthen them? Yeah, absolutely. All right, starting with page 36, we're going to talk about results or outcomes. So we use the word results and the word outcomes interchangeably as we move through various principles. Simply put, outcomes or results are changes observed or reported after participation in a service or activity. For the family, outcomes are changes in knowledge, attitudes, their skills, their abilities, or their behaviors. For the agency and the community, outcomes may be things such as changes in agency or public policy, organizational effectiveness, or social and health conditions. And so, three types of outcomes here that we're going to talk about. Outcomes can produce a change over time, they can produce a change in status, and then they can also produce a change in direction. So, change over time. Consider the difference in time frames in different situations. Short term for a client in need of shelter, maybe this afternoon, while short term for someone obtaining basic job skills training, maybe 6 months. You will want to identify the change to be observed in a time frame that matches the situation. This may be characterized as short term, intermediate term, or long term. Tongue twisters. All right, so we also have a change in status. So situations may be identified at different levels of status. Residents in one public housing project may feel that they are safe, while those in another project might feel that they are in crisis, depending on their location, maybe the neighbors that they have, what's happening in the environment around them. Some housing situations can even be considered to be thriving. And then lastly, a change in direction. So a positive outcome indicates progression towards the goal. A neutral outcome may indicate stability or no change in a status. And a negative outcome may indicate that the situation has changed for the worse. And so, as Shauna kind of introduced in the last module, part 2 of module 2, we talked about the 6 national goals and how they have transformed into the 3 national goals. So the 6 national goals were the foundation of the Community Action Network for 20 years, from 1996 to 2016. And while the national goals on the 2017 National Theory of Change have been changed, we're going to use this framework for our discussion. It's important for us to consider all of the levels as we think about the work the Community Action Network does, particularly at the local agency level. So this framework continues to be helpful for us. So we're going to start with goal 1 and goal 6. Sorry, after I get the drink. On page 37, we are going to start with goal 1 and goal 6, and these are going to be examples of family level outcomes. So goal 1 in the theory of change combines goal 1 and goal 6. Kind of confusing, but theory of change, and then we can talk about this as the 6 national goals. So goal 1 and goal 6 combined to be goal number 1 on our national theory of change. So goal 1 was low-income people become more self-sufficient. So self-sufficiency is more than just employment and employment-related activities, if we're going to use employment as an example here. It can also include outcomes from support activities necessary for the movement towards self-sufficiency and the reduction and elimination of barriers preventing self-sufficiency. So if we were going to think about examples of outcomes that were related to goal number 1, using the employment domain, page 37 at the top of the bullet points provides us some examples. So unemployed persons obtained employment or self-employment. Persons maintained employment for at least 90 days. Persons increased their earned income. And then looking at goal number 6 here at the bottom of page 37, that was low-income people, especially vulnerable populations, achieve their potential by strengthening family and other supportive systems. So there's a broad range of outcomes that are achieved by persons or families who maintain a level of stability or well-being as a result of the community action. So examples of these outcomes could be persons increased their education or skills, persons obtained, maintained, or improved their housing arrangements, maybe they reduced or eliminated an emergency need, or they just obtained access to services. And so goal 1 and goal 6 combined to be goal 1, which is individuals and families with low incomes are stable and achieving economic security. So really just that focus on you're helping the family, the individual with this service. That button, and then it should start. Okay, thank you, Erin. Yeah. All right. So agency capacity is identified in the performance management section of the theory of change and in the foundational statement, which is what we consider our high performing agencies. So it's not completely eliminated from that theory of change, it's just found in a different way, right? So without agencies that, have the capacity to do these things, we couldn't reach goal 1, goal 2, or goal 3. So, excuse me, goal 4 and goal 5 in the original 6 national goals were related to agency capacity. Goal 4 was that partnerships among supporters and providers of services to low-income people are achieved. It's not the existence or counting of partnerships and collaborations, but the impact that those partnerships and arrangements have made. So agencies formed or maintained partnerships and collaborations to improve community planning. We kind of talked about some of these when you all were prioritizing your needs, right? A lot of people were saying, gosh, our communities need these partnerships, and without agencies that have the capacity to do that, those partnerships can't be made. Goal 5 in the original 6 national goals was that agencies increase their capacity to achieve results. So agencies that are well run and meet accepted standards of excellence demonstrate continuous improvement and capacity to meet the needs of low-income individuals, families, and communities. So an example of this might be that an agency increased their ability to document client achievement of outcomes. Maybe an agency increased the number of staff that are trained in CAP 60. So their records, their documentation are getting better, things like that. So without, super high functioning agencies, we're not going to be able to meet those goals. All right, and then if you'll join me on page 39, we'll actually talk about community level outcomes. So the last 2 goals that we haven't talked about from the original 6 are goal 2 and goal 3. And those have actually stayed the same. They've just been worded a little bit differently and added to our national theory of change here. So with these goals, goal 2 and goal 3, there's now a renewed focus on the importance of community level outcomes in the work that the community action agencies are doing. I think in CSBG world, we call these community level initiatives, right? So goal 2, starting with our original 6 national goals, was that the conditions in which low-income people live are improved. So community outcomes are an integral part of community action and describe the allocation and focusing of public and private resources for anti-poverty purposes, improvement in the community infrastructure, and creation of employment and other resources to support low-income people in their transition towards self-sufficiency. So some examples of outcomes related to goal 2 were that low-income people have improved access to employment, housing, capital, and essential services within their community. We've increased that access, and so it becomes more accessible to everyone, right? That's a community level goal. There's another example. It says the supply of jobs, adequate and affordable housing, community facilities, capital and lending programs, or essential services was increased. And so once again, all of these things are increasing in our community, which makes them more accessible to our demographic. Just to remind you, goal 2 transitioned to goal 2 over here. They just changed the wording to say, communities where people with low incomes live are healthy, communities where people with low income live are healthy and offer economic opportunity.
Sarah, there has been a push too to make sure agencies are not referring to this population as the low-income population. They're either users of the services, clients, and so forth. And so when we're looking for on tripartite boards and stuff, the low-income people who want to stake in their community and represent that, they really recommend don't call them low-income people.
It's really important.
It's really important that language, it reflects the importance and not say, hey, poor person, can you please have us stay in what is happening here?
Do you think that would reflect to the mission statement?
I think it should, but that's obviously an agency decision.
Yeah, well, I'm sure most people have heard the conversations about people-centered language.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we say low-income populations, are we centering the person or no? We're centering their income, right?
Right.
So to me,
So
that's
you want to just be sensitive to how you're wording a lot of those things. We have we say all the time, when you target families, those families don't want to be those families either.
right.
So, making sure that you're just sensitive to how you're referring to the populations that you're serving.
That's a great conversation, though. I would love to hear what people do
Ours
refer to
says
them.
empowering people, so I wasn't sure if that was too broad or if that was.
I think it's like instead of saying, you see this a lot in your housing rules, like you can't have smokers, right? You can't say that. What you can say, no smoking. So what you're doing is what she's referring to and talking about is, we're talking about a community, not an individual person. So just how you use that language and being sensitive to how you refer to your clients in population. But when it comes to community outcomes, like I said, those families, they don't want to be those families either. They don't want to be identified as those families.
So then how do you refer to those folks? I'm curious, when you, like, if somebody does speak to you about your work, let's say outside of work, how do you describe to them what kind of populations you work with?
So
I'd be curious to
we
hear
will talk, yeah, we
Well, and if we want to get out in a decent time, I think this is a very important conversation, but if we want to have it now, I would like to limit to it like 5 minutes, because this is something that's huge and we could go down a rabbit hole for a while.
Right.
So do you guys want to
And
have
mine
this
is
now?
only in relationship to goal 3 for the communities and just being thoughtful of how we refer to those communities.
I just have a quick thing I wanted to say. This is very relative to new funding for those, especially with COVID situations, because that's a population that's not normally, they would be considered in that population. And so they are reluctant to apply because they don't want to be identified in that manner. Exactly. And that's,
I think making sure that you always refer to people and treat them with the dignity and respect that any human being deserves will help you guide the language that you want to use. We use a language in a parent liaison program where we constantly message all families need support and resources at different times. Those resources may look different. Some families may look at needing more gifted and talented or enrichment opportunities, and others might need emergency concrete supports like housing, food, and clothing. So all families need support. It just depends on your intentionality of how you're providing services.
I think you just nailed it right there, life enrichment opportunities.
And is that how you guys describe the populations you work with?
I say
We use
people
the word all
experiencing
the time.
poverty.
That's how I say it too, folks experiencing poverty, but I don't know if people
But
said
the
it.
rabbit hole that she's talking about is, I'm getting ready to do a big advertising push, and to qualify based on income. It's finding that delicate balance of letting the public know that this isn't for all of you. This is for the people who qualify for our program. And the easiest way that we say that typically, at least in government speak, is low income. But there's no way you're gonna put that in an advertisement.
No. And we use, a lot of the time, we'll use language of either you or someone you know may need these services, and income qualification, or qualifications based on income. So I, again, use the inclusive you or someone you know. It may not be you, but you may be able to reach out to someone you know that might be struggling a little bit more. And so I just think it's really, I think it's important to just recognize that experienced users, you're probably more likely to get a low-income representative on your board if you call them experienced users than, hey, can you represent my low-income population?
Which is how we usually do it.
Which is how we do it, and how many people have trouble finding their third portion of your trifecta.
Right, well, and to acknowledge that just language is so important.
We call
Right,
them a
matters.
person representative.
There you go. See, there's a lot of ways to refer
Yeah.
to it without saying, hey, poor person, come here.
Right. You know, and I think it's just important to note that, you know, when we're addressing our mission statement and all of that, we are not stigmatizing or othering because, you know, maybe we won't get people to utilize our services. So,
If there's a stigma attached, you are going to, you are putting up a barrier.
right. Great. Sorry, it looks like they're getting ready for our lunch. So thank you.
There is, we did do a training on person-centered language in the state about a year ago. So if you guys are interested, we can see if we can get that same person to do a training for the CSBG network.
We'll be addressing this too in the trauma-informed case management training that CSNO will be presenting on May 11th.
Great. Awesome. So maybe at the end of our training, we can get some of that information for those of you that would be interested. All right, for the sake of time, because as we just saw, our food is going to be here, and I'm sure many of you are just as hungry as I am. So we will finish on page 39, talking about goal 3, as we kind of just had a conversation about it with Susan. The original goal 3 in our 6 national goals was that low-income people own a stake in their community. Meaning that, you know, community outcomes describe the participation of low-income people in community organizations and community activities, including volunteer, paid involvement. You know, CSBG has the requirement that they have to have an experienced user on their board, right? So really translating that to how are we as a community situated to be able to allow experienced users to participate. So just a few examples of what, you know, outcomes could look like with goal 3. The number and scope of opportunities for low-income persons to participate in advocacy activities resulting in policy and program change was increased or maintained. Maybe the number of low-income persons owning a business was increased, or the number of low-income persons owning their own home was increased. And so just want to alert you back to our national theory of change. Goal 3 was reworded to people with low incomes are engaged and active in building opportunities in communities. So once again, maybe we can work on some of the language there, but. All right, so we are now on page 40, starting at the page that says comparison of family, agency, and community outcomes for employment. So just as we have identified the need in one domain in all 3 levels, it's also important that we identify results in one domain in all 3 levels. So, excuse me. Consider the outcomes that are achieved in those same 3 levels in the employment domain example below. So while many social sector organizations help people find employment, community action agencies. I think I got it. Thank you. Yeah. Examples of these might be partnerships were established with the public agency for job training and employment placement for low-income people. Agreement was made between a private corporation for placement of the low-income people into employment there. And then lastly, community level outcomes in the employment domain would address factors that affect the ability to secure and maintain employment in that community. So examples of this might be that new jobs were created in the community. Second shift childcare opportunities for low-income persons were expanded. We talked about this in our last module. And then maybe the unemployment rate decreased. So the point to be made here is that our outcomes need to match the level of need. So when we're looking at our needs statement from the logic model we're creating over here, we say families are unable to access affordable housing. So our outcome is going to want to be on the same level. Our outcome is going to want to change a family's status, right? So we have an activity, we're now on page 41, but I believe Shauna just passed out those activities. And what we're doing is we are going to take a needs statement and bring it to an outcome statement. So there are 10 needs statements here, and I believe, I'm just gonna take a look at maybe Susan's. So it doesn't, okay, so what you're gonna do here is you're gonna identify what level of need that is. Is it family level, agency level, or community level? And then I want you to write the outcome statement. So once again, refer to page 40 if you need examples, right? And a little hint here as you're completing this is that your outcome should be the obvious opposite of the need. So don't make this harder than it needs to be. Take a few minutes, maybe you work with the person next to you if you want to or in a group. Once again, identify the level of need, family, agency, or community, and then write the outcome or the obvious opposite, and then we'll go over the answers together.
Do you guys want to do the first one?
Sure. Okay. Go. Yeah.
Individuals need transportation to get to work. So what would the outcome?
Individuals have transportation.
Okay. And I heard another one over here.
Just an increased public transportation.
Okay. Individuals acquire transportation. Yours might be a little more community sounding. So.
And what level of need is that?
It's family.
Family, right? Okay.
Of course, I like the lines.
Yes.
But it's all the whole time. Yeah, and she's yeah, they bring her best in my life, because it's not equal to them. And that's where that's and that's where the whole family comes in. Oh, see, we're already trained in it. No response. She texted me and said that. Good, and she keeps leaving checks for me. Like, does she know that I'm not there to write you checks? Like, this time she's like, oh my God, I needed this amount. And I'm like, thank you. Before I didn't even have it.
Okay, here's your O.
Thank you. All right, we'll do just about one more minute. What time is that starting?
12:15.
Oh, so we're ahead. Are you gonna do module 4?
No, I won't do. Module 4 is right after lunch.
Oh, so then we're just a little bit ahead. Okay, cool. So we're good. All right, is everyone finished, or do any of you need a little bit more time to complete the outcome statements? Looks like everyone's done. All right. So we did the first one together. Individuals need transportation to get to work. The outcome is that individuals require transportation. This is a family level need and a family level outcome. All right, number 2, families need health care. First, what level of need is that?
We have, that's not
Oh, I think that they know that they're.
Do we have a different?
Our number 2 says staff have skills to work with families and trauma.
Oh, we do have a different outcome sheet. Okay. All right, number 2. Staff lack the skills to work with families in trauma. What would the outcome be?
Train staff for trauma-related.
Staff have skills to work with families.
Right, staff have the skills, right? And then, you know, depending on where they're gonna get the skills, right, could be in the service there. Is that, what level of need is that? Agency. Okay, 3. There is not enough affordable housing in our community. What level of need is that? Community. Okay, what would the outcome be?
We have more affordable housing.
There is affordable housing in our community, right? All right, number 4, families need housing so that they can afford. Level of need?
Family.
Family. Okay, what would the outcome statement be?
Families have housing they can afford.
Families have housing they can afford. All right, number 5, we do not have a housing program at our agency. What level of need is that?
Agency.
Okay, what would the outcome statement be at the agency level?
We have a housing program.
Right, our agency has a housing program. All right, number 6, individuals need skills to prepare them for living wage jobs. What level of need is that?
Family.
Okay, and what would the outcome statement be at the family level?
Individuals have skills to prepare them for living wage jobs.
Right, and it's important to note that in this one, we're not skipping that they have the skills and going straight to individuals have a living wage job, right? That's not, the need wasn't that they need the job, it was that they need the skills to prepare them for the job. All right, number 7, children are not ready for school. Is that, what level of need is that? Could be a community level, right? If we're talking about all of our, you know, children in the community. What would the outcome statement be at that level?
They are ready for school.
Children are ready for school, right? Our community has children that are prepared to enter public or private school. Number 8, senior citizens' homes are in disrepair, which threatens their independence. What level of need is that? Could be family, right? We're talking about the senior citizens right there.
Except for the apostrophe made me think we're talking about a lot of senior citizens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Grammar, Susan.
Yeah. Right, this is turning to a grammar lesson.
I did not bring her.
Okay, what would the outcome statement be?
Senior citizens' homes are safe
And they're independent.
and
And so they can maintain that independence.
Right. We just need their homes to be safe, right? Once again, kind of like we looked at number 6, we're not jumping over what that need is that just says senior citizens are independent, right? Because they could be independent in a lot of ways, but the need is that their homes are in disrepair. Number 9, families report food scarcity at least once a month.
Would that be community?
Family and food security.
Could be.
depends on your goal, because if your goal is to set up a food pantry.
That sounds like families.
A community level goal of this could be that the
There's not enough
food insecurity decreases by this amount,
Or
right?
there's not enough food pantries in the
Or
community.
food pantries, right, exactly. Talking about the resource itself and not counting the families and their food insecurity. So families report food scarcity at least once a month. What would be the outcome statement?
They have enough food.
Yeah, they're not reporting food scarcity.
Or reporting less food scarcity.
Reporting less, right? Yeah, that one's a little vague. Do we want to completely get rid of the food insecurity or what? All right, number 10, there are no summer feeding programs in this community. What level of need is that?
Community.
Okay, what would the outcome statement be for the community level?
Our
Summer feeding program.
Right, in this community. Once again, not jumping to say, we have no, food insecurity in this community because of the summer feeding programs. All right, so what we just did right there was we identified our outcome, and we did that A by matching the level that our need has and putting it into an outcome statement. So as we are building our logic model, we're going to write our outcome statement to match our needs statement. And as you can, maybe some of you can't see, it says, families are unable to access affordable housing. If we were to turn that into an outcome statement, what would that say? Families are able to access affordable housing. Perfect. All right. So I'll go over our key point summary, the objectives that I have hopefully covered and what you've learned. So we've identified outcomes in the first step in strategic planning. Legislative guidance provides the mandate for agencies to do good planning, but planning is important because it's the right way to manage an agency. The Drucker Foundation Self-Assessment Workbook offers supporting information that can be used to reinforce the basic foundation of the ROMA principles. Outcomes for community action are on 3 levels: family, agency, and community. There are many different outcomes for each of the 6 national goals. Each domain, such as employment, can have